the water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.
Mark DeRosa, welcome to Founder Secrets.
Woo! Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Longtime friend of the pod. So we'll start with the icebreaker and then dive in to Mark's background in business. This is a fun one, and by fun, it might be confusing and not very good, but we'll see. So the icebreaker is this: if you had to set up your office in any historical landmark, where would it be? And what would be your biggest daily challenge? So if I had to set up an office in a landmark, I think it'd be cool to have it in the Statue of Liberty. I lived in the financial district in New York for 4 years or 5 years. And if I turned my head just right out of my window, I could see the arm of the Statue of Liberty. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. So it'd be cool to have an office Statue of Liberty. And then what would be the biggest daily challenge? I think the biggest daily challenge is that I don't even know if there are bathrooms up there. Maybe there are. Mark, maybe you've been up there. I don't know. But in the
let you up there anymore.
Well, I know that's what would make it so unique is that, hey, this is my answer. So I get to be up in the top. And so I think that the biggest challenge would be, how do you host meetings? How do I get Wi-Fi? Very logistical kinds of things. Do I need a helicopter to always come into, I think it would be very impractical, but very cool. So that's my answer. I want to be up at the top, not at the bottom, but at the top of Statue of Liberty. Flavio, what about you? It could be in Romania.
Yeah, I guess it could be in Romania. Now I guess I have to choose Romania. No, I think the best would be, you ever see Succession where the guy works from a yacht in the Mediterranean? That seems like the best office setup. But perhaps Mediterranean is a little cold, so maybe in the Caribbean, in a warm water, but not too far away from land. I don't want to sink like those people did in the Mediterranean this summer. Or so and sometimes I could be in New York, right? So I could literally have the yacht right next to the Statue of Liberty, where you're up there in the wind and the cold, come down in the nice yacht, cozy near the water. So that would be my ideal place.
But it has to be historical. So is that an old yacht? You want an old yacht?
No, actually, I want the newest, most. I mean, the historical part of it, I'm not sure it's that important to me. I don't want to work in a historical place. I mean, I value history and I treasure it, but I don't feel like I need to be in it working.
All right, an old yacht. It's definitely going to sink. Mark, what about you?
So you can completely miss the intent of that icebreaker, but
no kidding.
I was thinking I would work out of the Lincoln Memorial
in DC,
right on the lap of Abraham Lincoln.
I'd be in the back. I wouldn't be sitting on his lap. So why integrity is key to how I live, my core value personal, and how we stretch it through the business. And when you talk about integrity and historical figures in American history, if he's not coming up as your number one choice, he's certainly number one, number two. So I'd love to be able to just look at him every day and see that. The negative to that is I'd have all these strangers bothering me all day, so I couldn't get my work done, right? So, but that's what I would pick. That was the first thing that popped into my head.
Well, you gave the best answer. All right. So Mark and Flavio and I have known each other a long time through EO in New York. And I think that where would be a good place to start is you're well known for
wearing hats.
For wearing hats. No, for going very deep on these topics that are considered very boring and very difficult to navigate for people. So for instance, it could be benefit regulations, insurance regulations, things like that. And that has been, in my view, you've been rewarded for that kind of deepness and thoroughness around navigating these policy decisions, questions around how this works in your business, right? So you've created a business around this quirk, a positive quirk of your personality. Do you think that's fair? And what is Vantage Point today?
So yes, the simple answer is yes. So this is always about taking complex things and figuring out a way to simplify it in a communication and then creating a program around it. So problem solving, at the end of the day, it's problem solving. And at the end of the day, it's also about helping people. So, and somehow I fell into this area that nobody else wants to talk about. Nobody wants to think about it, but you have to talk about it. You have to think about it. On the insurance side, my life story on my parents, my family side is my father, city sanitation, got his leg crushed when he was 44 years old, had 3 teenage boys, worked for a union, New York City union, didn't think to ask or wasn't told to ask, or didn't think he was smart enough to ask. And then he has this catastrophic injury that completely upends the family life, right? So that was a huge, and that happened, I think I was 14, 15 when that happened. So it was a huge impact on my life, right? So I see this, and I remember in the beginning, I was actually angry. I got angry at my dad. I was like, how can you do this, right? How come you didn't plan for this better? How come you didn't, talk to your union, find out all these things? And the interesting thing is my father's response was, and we had a family friend, it was a MetLife agent, it was a family friend. And my father's response was, every time he calls me, he tries to sell me something. So I don't want to talk to him. And because of that, we as a family ended up suffering greatly because of it. But that always stuck with me, right? And then the interesting thing is when I graduated college and graduate school, I didn't have a job. It's back in 1990. At that point, it was the worst recession since the Great Depression, but nobody seems to remember that. So none of us had jobs. So my graduating class, 12 of us had about 150 had a job at graduation. And I actually interviewed at a very large MetLife agency. Again, another family friend put me in touch with that. And I had the interview. And it was the most disgusting interview I ever had in my life. It was slimy. It was all about production and volume. It was all about me as the employee of MetLife. None of it, in all the interviews I had, none of it had to do with the customer and doing the right thing by the customer. And I remember going home to my parents after that interview and saying to my parents, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what industry I'm going to end up, but the one industry I'm never going to end up in is the insurance industry. That's where that happened. So, and then months later, I get a call from Blue Cross and I get a job. My MBA was in finance. I ended up getting a job as an auditor at Empire Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And I did operational and financial audits. So I went from having a poor life experience related to insurance. Then I had these interviews, also poor experiences as a young adult. And the next thing I know, I'm in this business. So it was a completely accidental path.
Well, on that note, I want to ask, because actually I happen to know a lot of people these days, just the family and friends that are in that age, again, graduating from college. And it seems like, even though we're not in a recession, market's booming, a lot of positivity. It seems like I talk to a lot of people that are in the same situation you described being in 1990. And whether it's because of AI or industry shifts or, I don't know, Instagram and kids not having any skills or college being bad, I don't know what it is, but I'm wondering, what would you advise you graduating today? Like, what would you do? Yeah, would you follow the same path or would you do something different? Or yeah,
if I was talking to a young person that's interviewing,
if you were graduating today and you were advising that, Mark.
So the interesting thing that I would say is, I don't care what business that you're in, we're all in the communications business. So, and I find that so many people do poor communication. They have poor communication skills. So I actually looked at a resume yesterday and I'm working through a headhunter. We have a bunch of headhunters because we're continually always interviewing. And then I'm finding that there is a lowering of standards. So this headhunter, I read the resume and I replied back and I said, I don't want to meet with this person. Poor excuse, poor grammar, poor spacing, just poor things all over the resume. And then the reply I got back from that was like, it's not that bad. Why won't you interview with them? And I think that it's not that bad has turned into this corporate acceptance. And I won't accept it because at the end of the day, if I'm a strong communicator, I can't have a downgrade when a customer of ours speaks to me, but then has to speak to somebody else on my staff. And there's a market drop in the communication skills. That's a major problem for my business, besides the fact that it bothers me personally if I have somebody like that. And I see that so often with these younger people coming in. Grammars, resumes are poorly written. Communication skills and interviews is poorly written. It's disappointing, to be honest. I'd like to see an increase in school and colleges and so forth. I feel like it's a lost skill.
It's funny because a lot of these people have degrees in communication. A lot of times the people I'm talking to literally have a degree in some marketing communication, business communication. And, you're right. Resumes like written by AI or even worse, like a Canva sort of template. And so do you think it's just a matter like, well, just got to sift through more resumes, nothing's changed? Or do you think like we're in a fundamental change in the industry or in the world in hiring and people? Or do you kind of like, it's just more of the same, just got to get through it, they got to get better, and that's how it's always been and will be?
Well, the difference now is your talent pool as an employer, right? Our talent pool went from being within a roughly 30-mile radius, right? You had to go to an office, and now your talent pool is worldwide, right? So to that question, I'm going to say, look, I'm going to keep my level of standards. I'm just going to spread out my outreach to other places.
And then they needed the other people need to step it up. So what is Vantage Point? Like if you're someone who is not in the benefit space, insurance, doesn't understand any of these things, and maybe you understand that you have health insurance. What is Vantage Point? Who do you sell to?
So we sell to small and mid-sized companies, typically between 10 employees and 1,000 employees, in that range. And we do all the things that allow a company to run better. So what do I mean by that? So we manage the employee life cycle from hire to retire. And within that, what happens with an employee? Well, I need to onboard the employee. So then there's payroll, there's benefits. You need to use that to recruit and to retain those people. You need to pay them. You need to pay them properly. You need to pay them within the rules. So now there's an HR component to that. You need to help them buy the things that make sense. You have to educate them so they understand the impact to them and to their family. So then you want to talk to them about financial planning. You want to talk to them about retirement planning and insurance planning. And then when they exit and when they leave, we want to make sure that from an employer perspective, that they're doing everything right, because it's what we call lawsuit avoidance, right? So we want to make sure our clients never get into trouble, but are still doing the right thing by their employees, but doing it in a cost-effective manner.
And go ahead, Flavia.
It's like, I'm wondering though, how it seems like you jumped in. How many employees do you guys have now?
17.
70. And how many clients do you service?
About 300.
300. I'm wondering, how many employees do you touch across those 300 clients?
Good question.
Probably
Those 300 clients, certainly it's in the tens of thousands of employees.
It's incredible. I would say so. It's also a highly competitive market, right? I mean, I know we've used Rippling and JustWorks and all these kind of 100+ million VC funded startups that seem to all be funded by Parker Conrad, the guy that started Zenefits, which I ran into him in the early days. He's a wild dude. Anyway, the point is, it seems like there's a lot of competition in the space. But it also seems like you're talking about, a personal touch matters a lot. And so I guess maybe talk about how you've decided to get into this business and stay in this business 25 years despite all the competition.
I used to have brown hair, so that has a lot to do with it. So the thing that's what I find is unique about the business is there's the boilerplate answers, and then there's applying specific guidance, right? I'm in the business of supplying specific guidance. Let's dig deep into the problem, and then let's give you specific guidance. So on the HR side, as an example, there's a company called Mineral, okay? It's a lot of companies offer it. It's something that we can offer, and we actually have tried to offer it in the past, and we test it, and we would throw out scenarios to them and say, hey, it's telephonic. You don't know who you're talking to. You never meet the person. It's 1-800, what I call 1-800 black hole. You just get the next person in the queue. And we would throw out all these HR scenarios, and then we would get this generic answer, and then you say, well, what should we do with that scenario? And the response typically is, well, we'll send you 2 articles. So they'll Google something and they send you an article on it. And then ultimately you still need to, as the employer, figure out and interpret that and create your own guidance. And that's where problems happen. So we're the guidance people, right? We're going to dig deeper. We're going to ask more questions, and we're going to apply it. So I'm going to put my business owner's hat, because the reality is, an owner's perspective is going to be different than an HR person's perspective, than it's going to be for a CFO's perspective. So that's why I have HR people on staff and I have finance people on staff. So we are able to look at the different perspectives depending on who's asking for the help and the guidance. And I think that's what sets us apart, and that's what's allowed us to stay in business. And quite honestly, Flavio, we spend a lot of time on each client. We do not spend a lot of money on marketing. I'll be the first one to say my marketing material needs some freshening up. But we end up spending so much time with our clients because we're dealing with such things at such level. We customize everything. This is one of the reasons about our marketing material. We customize everything. Education meetings, you would think we would use the same material over and over again, but every client is different, and what they're coming from is different, and the employee makeup is different, and where they're based in the country is different. So we try to take all those things into account. We could be dealing with white collar professionals. Tomorrow we could be dealing with blue collar warehouse people. It's not fair to them for us to use the same material and the same pitch and the same speech, because it's a different audience, and it has to resonate with them. Because at the end of the day, I don't want anybody to ever walk to say the same thing that my father said to me. Vantage Point just tried to sell me something, right? We literally never like using that word here. We don't. We advise and we guide. If it turns out that we advise and guide, and we're offering a product that has to go along with it, then that's fine. but it's not selling.
Do you think the competition's gotten, I mean, you talked a little bit about this. Do you think it's gotten harder, easier, worse, better, like your competition over the last 10, 15 years?
So harder. Okay, so there's a couple of different reasons why. So one, so now we have the government continues to encroach in the industry. So ACA, known as Obamacare, right, did a massive overhaul to the insurance industry. You have technology companies that are coming to the space, but typically what happens is the competition is product centric. So they're creating products. So you mentioned Rippling. At the end of the day, Rippling is a benefit admin platform, and that's what they're selling. And the platform could be the right one or it could not be. But if you're talking to a Rippling salesperson, they're going to try their hardest to make sure that they convince you that Rippling is the best product for them. And that's not always the case. There is no product out there that is the best for everybody. We all know that. Same thing with the PEO market and competition. PEOs have certainly over the years, in the last 15 years, have grown in stature, grown in market size. But at the end of the day, they sell a box. Now, it's a nice shiny box, and sometimes the box works well for you, but man, they're going to try really hard to convince you that my box is the best box. And that's just not the case. So I think there still will be a place for people like us, like Vantage Point, to do that. But it's what I call a lot of radio static, right? It's hard to get that clear channel. Like, where's Vantage Point on the radio dial, right? Because I can't seem to hear them. That's probably our biggest competition is getting through that static.
Speaking of radio dial, what is Zen Arcade? You have this thing in the background, and is it a radio?
Nah, so if you see above it, it's the lights in it. So this is a band called Husker Du, which were one of the first bands that came out in the Minnesota and that whole Seattle grunge era. This is back in the early 80s. So they were really the pioneers to that style of music. And that was when I was in college. And just like the Ramones were pioneers with what they did, but they never made any money. And there's like a cult following. Husker Du is the same. They were in the beginnings. They never made the money, but like REM says they were a huge influence. Soundgarden, the Foo Fighters, Nirvana, all mention Husker Du as like one of their main, and they were all in that area, was a main influence to their style of music. And this is an old college poster that I pulled out of my garage. I didn't even know what it was. I just had this cardboard tube. I pulled it out of the garage. I was like, oh my goodness, I have all these posters in here. And this one, I just have an affinity towards it. So I put it in my office.
So for those who don't know, by the way, because I didn't actually know, it means a professional employer organization. And that's the kind of company you are, although you do more than that, but PEOs tend to help with payroll, benefits, HR, tax, employee handbooks, that kind of thing. We've used many PEOs across the years, and you're right, it's never kind of a one size fits all. And I think, yeah, it makes sense that there will always be a need to help employers. There's how many millions of businesses in the US and more starting. And I think this specifically focuses on small businesses because, a Coca-Cola probably has, their own thing they're doing internally. I'm curious though. Okay, so do you think when you started Vantage Point 25 years ago, you thought you'd still be doing it 25 years later? And kind of where do you see kind of the evolution of this business?
So did I expect to be doing this? I didn't know. Certainly there was no grand plan, right? So in many respects, my business and the growth of it has been reactionary. It hasn't been very intentional and strategic, which in many respects you can kind of say that it's not necessarily a negative. It's just the reality is what happened. So in the beginning, I sold health insurance, and then that's all I knew. I worked I worked for health insurance companies, and then once I started talking to customers, then I just started creating programs that I felt would fit the need just by asking questions and finding out more about their businesses. So then we just morphed. So as much as Vantage Point years ago, Vantage Point did employee benefits insurance brokerage. Well, then a couple of years later, then Vantage Point bought a claim system to do pre-tax reimbursement programs to create increased take-home pay for employees, create additional tax deduction for business owners. So then we morphed into that. Then PEOs, again, employee employment programs, came into the market, and we looked at it and said, well, hey, we're kind of doing most of the things that they're doing. We need an HR piece. So we went out and hired some HR people and took some staff. We became experts on HR. So then we were in the HR outsourcing business. And then from there, it's same thing with the retirement, 401ks, 403bs, pension plans, stuff like that. Then we just morphed into that. And then the last piece that we added a few years ago was payroll administration. So in many respects, I'm really running 5 different businesses under one umbrella, but it's all It could be a la carte. It could be packaged as one, depending on what the client wants. I think that's, and we also actually in the midst of filing for our own PEO. So we'll have that also. So it's about Vantage Point, the name has been consistent, but the programs and the products that we sell and that we offer have certainly changed over the years. So what's next? I don't know. We'll see where the market goes. I don't know. Like I said, it's not that strategic. I think we're to the point that I can look an employer in the eye and say, I can help you with anything and everything that has to do with you and your employees, right? So I don't know.
Maybe let me ask more acutely. I guess there's a lot of private equity groups these days that come and roll up these mom and pop sort of PEOs and insurance businesses locally that have the local relationships, and they're like, we'll just add a bunch of these together, turn it into $100 million revenue business, and sell it to the next larger fish. What do you say to those people?
So really good point, Flavio. So in our PE is all over our space, and most of my colleagues of firms, and most firms are generally smaller when they were on their own, were smaller than mine, and certainly didn't do all the administrative work that we do. But the reality is most of them are sold. We're one of the few left at our size that has not sold. So I'm either the smartest guy in the room or I'm the dumbest guy in the room. But the one thing I'll say is, to a person that I know, every single person that sold, all of a sudden their care for their customer completely dropped, okay? Because the corporate structure that they become part of, caring about the customer is not a core value. It's not part of the corporate mission, right? It's about exactly what you say, roll up money, 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 and to move on to the next. And I have longstanding relationships. And again, is it foolish thinking from a business owner's perspective? It could be. But at the end of the day, I'm the one who's got to shave each morning and look myself in the mirror, right? And if I start sacrificing my morals and my ethics for the dollar, or because somebody else in some office in Chicago who bought me 3 years ago who says, "Hey, Mark, you're not hitting your numbers," I would have a real hard time with that. So am I leaving money on the table? 100%, right? I know my business is worth. I know other people that have sold out for it. I'm not in that frame of mind. I can't do that yet. And look, I lose customers. Nobody keeps all their customers. And there are customers I think I have great relationships with, and they still leave for a variety of reasons, or they sell, right? There's a variety of different reasons, or new people come in, right? But it's not a model that I'd be proud of. So I hold on to that.
Before we shift gears, you've been in this business a long time, the 25 years, and I wonder if the longevity, do they go hand in hand? Like the reason you've had such longevity is because you have this, you really do care about the clients, and it's not just about the easy wins or the easy money, right? And so you're able to decline these, because it's not just private equity, before private, there are always been shiny objects to come in and try to distract you, or I'm sure that there are services or products that you could sell that maybe aren't good for the customers but are good for you. You get a good commission, and it seems that you're very in it for the long game.
We're in it for the long game. One of the interesting things that we did years ago is when I hired my first employee, I said one of the first things I said to them was, "Don't ever share a commission statement with me." And they said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I never want to know what we make per client, because if I do, even subconsciously, it's going to skew my recommendations and suggestions to them." So, and we've kept to that. We're 25 years later. If you ask me what I make percentage-wise, commission-wise, whatever, I can't tell you. Now I have an idea, right? Because I still have to run a business. But bonus programs, there's bonus programs all over my industry. I don't know of any of them. And again, we do that consciously on purpose. I never want to skew, but my competition doesn't. They're the exact opposite, right? They're going to say, "Hey, what's going on with that carrier? What's that bonus level? We have to make sure we hit that because that leads to our bottom line and profit." So that's what we see in our space, and that's bothersome. It's bothersome to me. Couldn't do it.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Recently, you became a partner in a brand new business, completely different industry, completely different. Woodhaven Recovery. What can you share about Woodhaven, and why did you start it? What is it? Where is it now?
Yeah. So Woodhaven Recovery, nothing strategic, nothing planned, but reactionary to life, right? I always say is everybody has events in their life, and what makes you who you are is not the actual events, but how you reply to and respond to the events, right? So my family suffers from addiction. My wife suffers from addiction. My son suffered from addiction. Thankfully, they're both in recovery, and we've stayed together as a family. And what we learned during the journey was didn't like the journey, just didn't feel right. So, and then started seeing all these gaps and lapses in care, and especially let's just focus on the kids, because my son started going down this path when he's 14 years old. I mean, 14-year-old kid, and there's plenty of other 14-year-old kids. And I met all these other kids as young as 12 years old that were similar paths with him, 14, 15, 16, these teenage boys, right? That just became marginalized, unmarginalized, don't get the care and seek and the treatment that they're looking for. So Woodhaven Recovery was built to help kids that are suffering from substance use disorder, which is a term, again, I never knew that existed. It's called SUD, right? I've learned these things as we go. We built an extended recovery program, residential based. It's in Pennsylvania, that has a full continuum of care to help these kids establish sobriety and learn how to have a joyful life. And it's not always specific about recovery. It's also about helping them have fun, right? But knowing that they can have fun without succumbing to drugs and alcohol to replace that joy. And the interesting about this journey is it takes time, right? So, and these programs didn't exist. So just a quick example. And again, these are the things that we're learning, and we're spending so much time in the space. And I love it. And yes, I'm working 7 days a week. And this is, I do Vantage Point Monday to Friday and half a Saturday, and then half a Saturday and Sunday is on Woodhaven Recovery. But you take all these programs, and this is so much, there's so many other programs that are similar like this, like there's this cutoff, like these kids, these teenagers, they go away to rehab and they go for psychiatric treatment and do all this other stuff. And then you finally get these kids back on their feet. And then what do you do? And then the kid's ready for college, and the kid goes to college. And what happens when you go to college, where so many colleges, the focus is on let's get drunk, let's get high, let's do this, let's do that. And all of a sudden these kids are thrown back into this world, and there's no lifeline for them, right? So, where's the lifeline? So we're really, if we're talking about anything, I'm trying to shake up an industry. So if anything, that's an industry I want to shake up, right? Because I think there's such gaps in that, to create a much better continuum to help these kids become young adults and happy young adults and valuable additions to society. So it's been a great journey so far. And again, it's a journey I took from pain.
And what can you share about what it's like to run? Because such a different business than Vantage Point. And Vantage Point, you have all these advantages, longevity. You have deep expertise in the space. Whereas I assume when you went into Woodhaven, you have none of those advantages, right? Like nobody knows who you are. So how are you able to navigate that and start a business in what I assume is a complicated space from scratch?
So there's two things that one is being vulnerable, and two, showing passion, leaving everything else out. I started going to trade shows without knowing anything, right? And I would just share my family's story, and I'm saying this is what I'm trying to achieve. And by being genuine, people will help. So we learned, and we're learning every day, and we're learning different things, what to do. I'm learning all these new acronyms, right? In my benefits business, Vantage Point, right? We're filled with acronyms, and I know them like the back of my hand. Now all of a sudden I'm in this entirely new industry, and I've got all these people throwing brand new acronyms at me, and I've got to learn all these things. So it's been, to your point, Taylor, is one, I think I'm doing really good work, right? It's soul fulfilling work, number one. Number two is I'm putting my business owner's hat on, my entrepreneurial hat on, and I love the idea of building something from scratch, completely different than what I've done all these years, because I love the challenge, and it's problem solving. And once again, the common theme is we're going to help people, and it's a complicated space, and people, i.e. the decision makers, right, struggle with it. The parents, the family struggle with this, and they need guidance and expertise, but from a compassionate angle. So in many respects, my core values translate to the new business, even though it's a completely different business. And I think that's what's allowing us to ramp up in the successful way we have so far.
You touched on this a little bit about how you do Monday to Friday Vantage Point, but you have a family, you have personal interests, you're a very active guy. So how do you manage the time, not just the time, but the attention of the employees of Vantage Point? These are two businesses that I assume their staffs don't overlap, and it always interests me when people have different business interests in that way. And are the staffs like secretly thinking, oh well, if Mark wasn't spending so much time over there, like how do you kind of manage those personality of the people around you, and then also your own time in that way?
Yeah, really, really good question. And it's interesting. And I'll give another example. Like even years ago, to your point about employees, and years ago when we bought our office building, and I was looking at office buildings, and I told the staff, I said, no matter what, I'm only looking in a radius within 20 minutes of here, so nobody has to worry about having to commute longer. And it took us about a year, and we finally bought the building. And then literally half the staff came to me and said, thank God you bought a place. And I was like, but I told you in the beginning, I said, I promised you within 20 minutes, and we were within 8 minutes. But everybody still went the other way and said, my commute's going to be double and triple. So, and that always stuck with me. And then same thing when I announced to my staff that we were creating Woodhaven, it was similar. I said, it won't impact what's going to happen with Vantage Point. It won't do that. But I could see it in their eyes, right? It didn't matter what I said. To your point, they would believe that it would take up time. So how we've done it and how I've been able to manage it is, one, I work a lot of hours anyway. I don't sleep that much. My kids are now in college. My twins are in college. So honestly, it does help that they're not around. So I have more time to spend on it. My wife is one of the partners on Woodhaven Recovery. So that allows us to spend our time together and doing stuff on Woodhaven together. If it feels right, right? If it feels right, business-wise, if it feels right for your personal fulfillment, if it feels right, whatever the activity is, you'll always find the time to do it, is how I look at it, right? So it just like it's if I didn't spend any time with the family, then there's nothing wrong with going home and having dinner with the family. And then when the family starts settling down for the night into their own activities, there's nothing wrong, in my mind, there's nothing wrong with going back to the office or open up the laptop and working in from home, and then working from 10 to midnight type thing. So you find the time. Look, I always say is my favorite holiday of the year, right, is daylight savings day, right? Because I get an extra hour. So that's my favorite holiday. So
Says it all right there. How do you view the future of when as you continue along this entrepreneurial journey? Do you want to hold Vantage Point another 25 years? You don't have to answer that, but how do you view the future of how do you plan things out? And, especially with these two businesses now, do you want to grow them? Yeah. Especially with the changing climate in both, very complex space. I assume they're going to be very different industries 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now than they are today, both of them. So how do you kind of think about that and think about the future in that way?
So the interesting thing is that, well, Woodhaven there's three of us. There's three partners, and in that business, having partners has provided freedom. It allows me to do what I do with Vantage Point, and allows me to do both and to manage that. And the interesting thing is, if you ask me about Vantage Point, I own Vantage Point, right? If I want to take it in one direction, I can. I might have some staff that might grumble, right? Well, they might agree, but I could take it in whatever direction. I can't do the same thing with Woodhaven, right? And I have partners. It's collaboration. So I think what's going to happen is, as long as both bring fulfillment and bring enjoyment, and we're delivering programs at the level that I'm happy with, there is no end sight, right? Because it's all the journey. It's not the end of the journey. It's not the finish line. It's always about the journey. So as long as the journey's fulfilling, then the journey will continue until at some point that I physically can't, mentally can't, but there's no specific exit at this point in time.
And so as we kind of round things out, and we'll enter into the life hack, what advice would you have for a young entrepreneur? You don't have to be young in age, but somebody who's just kind of starting their entrepreneurial journey. Earlier we talked about, advice for a potential worker, but if, a lot of the people listening to this are either founders themselves or they're thinking of founding a company. So what advice would you have for someone early in that journey?
A couple different things. Number one is you go with your gut. That's number one. Whatever you have a situation, typically your first gut response is probably going to be the right response to make. That's number one. Number two is, as soon as you can, hire staff. It's the best thing I ever did, right? So it has nothing to do with profit. As soon as I had enough money to bring in somebody else, then that's when the business starts to take off. So you can, in my opinion and in my experience, I could not be where I am today without having good staff. And expressing gratitude to them also is such a huge part of it. And then the third thing I would say, again, from my experience, is don't shortchange some of the decisions. Meaning, right? if there's a situation where you may have to spend dollars instead of pennies, be smart with that. Don't chase the pennies, chase the dollars. So that's what I'll say.
Great advice. Great advice. So we'll end with life hack here. So this could be, so I have a very specific one, but this could be software, a new app you're using, could be a way of sleeping, could be a product, could be a new pillow you just bought, anything. We've seen it all in here. And so I have a very specific life hack, and it's this. I travel quite a bit. And so the things that I travel with, I'm always looking to make more efficient or to make better. And for a long time, I had a Briggs and Riley suitcase. I took it on hundreds of trips. It went to dozens of countries. It was amazing. And Briggs and Riley is amazing because they're expensive. It's expensive luggage, but they have a lifetime warranty. And one of the wheels bent going through an airport. I hit something, I don't know. And they replaced it for free. Like it took them 2 weeks, but to their credit, they took it back. And I swore then, I was like, man, I'll never switch from this company. So fast forward to 3 years ago, and I wanted some new luggage because I wanted spinner luggage. I wanted the spinner wheels. And I started reading, all these reviews, right? Wirecutter has reviews. All these different companies have reviews. I spent hours reading reviews. I would go on Amazon, read those reviews. And I settled on what seemed to be kind of the unanimous number one choice, which is called a Travel Pro spinner. It's like Wirecutter's number one pick for the last 8 years. And when I was reading the reviews, someone said, this is a great suitcase. But the problem is that if you are a person who puts a lot of stuff in their suitcase and you try to like really mash it in there, it's not the suitcase for you. And I read that and I thought, I'm going to buy this suitcase and I'm going to think of this review. Fast forward 3 years, that has been 100% true. So this suitcase, and this is my life hack. So suitcases, they have suitcases, they all have the handle. You pull them up and you walk around with it and you push them back down. All suitcases have the handle inside the suitcase. So in other words, they're in there with your clothes. The Briggs & Riley is the only one that has the patent on allowing it to be on the outside of the suitcase. And this is important because it allows you to have a flat working area inside of there where you can put all your crap in there. And then when you go to zip it down, it's not compressing on the rails for the handle. And so I put a lot of stuff in my suitcase and I try to compress it. And probably 40% of the time when I try to open the Travel Pro handle, it won't, because it's so compressed by clothes that you can't open and close the kind of telescopic handle. So my life hack is to buy Briggs & Riley. Or if not, then find one that gets around the patent somehow. So in the next couple of months, I'm going to let go of the Travel Pro and I'm going to go back and get the Briggs & Riley spinner that I should have bought all along. So that's my life hack, is that I went deep on this for years. And I was kind of giving this talk with some guys that I travel with, and they were like, hey, you should put this out there. So the life hack is that Briggs & Riley, the patent on that outdoor or that exterior railing really does make a difference. So that's my hack. What do you think, Mark? What's your hack you'd like to share?
That's a good hack. Geez, I'm gonna do a hack from traveling. So this might be a little bit different than the angle that you're taking. I always found that the hack I would tell everybody is, and the interesting is when I just started Vantage Point, my wife said, you don't even take your allotted time off while you're working for somebody else. I can imagine what's going to happen when you go out on your own and start your own business, because then you're never going to take the time off. So we had a handshake deal and saying, we are taking 5 weeks off a year no matter what. So the hack is twofold. Is one, make sure you take the time. You have to re-energize, you have to recharge yourself. Even if you don't think you need to, it's important to do. That's number one. Number two is, and I'll only speak for myself about from a travel perspective. We used to travel and we would fly, we would pick a place, just pick a place wherever it is in the world. Geneva, I'm going to go to Geneva, okay? We would only book the first 2 nights of a trip. And then we would both have a mission. We have to meet as many possible that are from here and ask them, what do they do for fun? And based on all of those responses, then we would create our itinerary. Then we would rent a car, or we would hop on another plane and we would go to a different, I would go to people and say, where do you go for the weekends? Where do you go? Well, we go here, we go there. And I'm like, well, how do you get there? Well, it's a little bit far. You have to take a plane. Great. I'm going to go book another plane, or take the train, or do this. And then after work, where do you guys hang out? Where do you go with your friends? Well, we go to these, we go to this part of town. Great. That's where we're going to go. So my hack is, don't be afraid to talk to locals. Everybody loves to share of themselves. And you're going to end up with such experiences that you will never get If you book a tour, or you just book a beach vacation and you're sitting in that same fancy hotel, get out of the hotel, explore the streets, find out what's going on. And there are I have some crazy stories and things that when I look back, I probably shouldn't have done some of the things that we've done. But man, the great things so far outweigh, and the experiences and the memories that I'll always have and the stories I get to share with other people. That's my hack. Don't be afraid to truly travel.
What a great place to leave it. Mark, thanks so much for coming on. How can people reach out to you if they want to reach out and say hi?
Reach out. LinkedIn really reached out. Mark at vantagepointbenefit.com.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on.
It's awesome. Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flavio. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down. Hey.